How did you get into jazz culture, and then how did you also decide that you wanted to become a jazz musician?
I used to go with my uncle, who used to train fighters in a boxing gym. And the first thing when you walk in is you hear a speed bag, you hear, somebody yelling time, or you hear a punching bag, and you hear music, really heavy duty Latin music, or you had like jazz. I started developing this feeling about jazz because my uncle, that's all he played. I mean, Miles Davis, Cal Tjader, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole. So I was already fed this music. Like it was almost like they were trying to mold me into something.
Gotcha.
But it was just listening. So as a result, when I got into the different schools I went to, I was kind of bored with the music. I was with everybody, and everybody was singing the songs, the Stones, the Beatles, they were doing Elvis, they were doing everything. But somehow that music just didn't appeal to me. I started playing vibes because I started listening to Cal Tjader, and then I started listening to Roy Ayers, then I started listening to Milt Jackson, then I started listening to all these artists. I happened to meet a friend of mine at East LA College who was on the Houston Astro Farm System. He was from Fremont High School, and he had like a 93-mile-an-hour fastball. But he played drums, and he lived on 103rd and Avalon. So he says, hey, man, why don't you come over to my crib, man? I got some musicians coming. So when I went, I met some incredible musicians. Yeah. Woody Theus, Sonship, Sherm McKinney, Michael Stanton, who turned out later to be the music director for Marvin Gaye. He was one of them. And then Kylo Turner, this trumpet player. And he liked the way I played vibes, and he said, why don't you come over to this other pad, man? I'm doing this gig. And that's when I met Herbie Baker, who became my best friend and confidant, and actually helped me pursue my career even further.
Well, one thing that's very interesting to me about your story is this Latino perspective of jazz in the black inner city, right? When I think about just the music of soul music, jazz music in Los Angeles, I don't hear about much people that weren't black doing that. So is there a reason why I don't hear that, or was that prevalent? Like, talk to me about this.
I think what was happening is that I was hanging around with these musicians from South Central because I wanted to. I never felt because I wasn't black that I didn't fit. I just never thought about that because in a boxing gym, you're seeing all kinds of characters, and they're all made up of this framework of what goes on in a boxing gym, and nobody gives a damn about color. They may say what they say on the side or whatever, but it's about getting the job done. And so for me, it was a natural thing. I was stepping into black homes and family and crashing over and living with people and hanging out, that it actually caused the problem when I went back to my high school, because I started doing all the assemblies there with my black musicians, inviting black musicians into the East Side and into Montebello. And then I started taking black musicians to UCLA. I was the first. Wow. Nobody was doing that stuff. And as a result, what culminated into something I thought was being an open forum where people could come from all walks of life and gather and listen to music became more pressurized, and you started seeing distinctions in class structure. People would make comments when I did the assemblies, and a lot of people were yelling out, names and stuff. And the guys, they all believed in me, and we had played together, so it was never a problem.
So is this a time when you said that you had a choice to be going in the lowriders or doing music?
Yeah, 66, 67, and 68, I was already busting out. And then by the time I hit 69, 70, I entered UCLA in the fall of 1968, 69. And then I pursued, once I landed at UCLA, I mean, you're coming from the East Side and you go to the West Side.
Right.
It's a whole different trip.
Right.
People are open-minded.
Right.
There's freedom of expression. You know, but you know, anybody going to look at you and stare at you because you have a certain kind of way of thinking or looking or playing music or the way you dress, whatever. I didn't give a damn about that shit. I was on the campus and I had a Great Dane, I had a black Great Dane. His name was Queequeg. And I had him with me. He was an 8-month, 140-pound Great Dane. He was beautiful. Wow. So I'm walking up the campus, you know, about 8 o'clock on a Saturday. You know, it's nice, peaceful, beautiful campus. All of a sudden I get to Royce Quad between Powell Library and Royce Hall. And I started hearing Frank Sinatra. So I walked over to front of Royce. I tied my dog up to a fire hydrant there. I walked in. Nobody's in the big mezzanine, these big Gothic looking doors. And I walked in, and it was beautiful. I could hear Frank Sinatra. So I would go to the main doors to go into this theater, and I walked in. The place was half filled, and there was Frank Sinatra with a tuxedo, and he's talking to his people. Damn. So I decided to kick back. I said, hey, man, Frankie, man, shit, this is cool. So I sat back, I'm kicking it, you know. So this man standing there, he was like, it turned out he was the stage manager and the coordinator of so many places. And he walks up to me and he looks at me, and I had this sombrero and I had it to the side, and I had my boots and Levi's and t-shirt, you know, just totally out of character. This guy, he walks up to me, he goes, hey, you do not belong here. He was a thick Spanish accent. He says, you come with me. So I get up, you know, I said, hey, man, you know, I don't belong, I didn't pay, you know, I'm walking out. And suddenly the two security guys come after the fact. They walk up and we're walking out and they're escorting me out. And I turn around and I look at one of the security guys. They turn out to be football players. I said, hey, what's going on here? You know, Frank Sinatra, what's happening? And they said, it's a Frank Sinatra award. I said, can anybody get that award? They said, well, if you go to school here. I said, oh, okay. And a year later, to the date, I was standing there in the green room with my gabardine suit, had my, you know, ready to drink champagne with Notary, the people that won.
That's
that
beautiful.
was when I won the Sinatras, and Herbie was my arranger and conductor and stuff.
So is that how you got noticed by Impulse?
No, that's how I got noticed in the Frank Sinatra Award Scholarship. What happened was, 2 weeks later, Herbie was killed in an automobile crash, a head-on collision.
Wow. And
that ripped me up, man. I left. I went to San Francisco. I mean, I literally didn't want to see anyone. Yeah. I didn't want to have, I had no interest with anybody. I left the music business for a while. I came back, I tried to talk to some local musicians, but I just didn't feel, it wasn't the same feeling, you know?
Yeah.
When you're involved with somebody and you're close to somebody, because Herbie and I were inseparable, man. I mean, inseparable. One day, when a keyboard player was supposed to come, pretty notable keyboard player, he didn't show for a gig, and they left me there. I said, you know, that's it, man. I want to play piano. That's it, man. I ain't gonna rely on nobody. Then, 1 year later, I got the record deal through Lee Younge at ABC Dunhill, Impulse Records. Lee Younge was Lester Young's brother, and he was a producer for ABC. And I went to him 3 different times. I approached him like you would a job, trying to get a job in a butcher shop. He just said, keep working on it, keep working on it. So the 3rd time I went back, I gave him a demo. I said, Lee, what do you think? He listens to it and he goes, so what do you think, Garrett? You like this? You enjoying? Are you happy with your music? Tell me, what do you think? I said, I love it, Lee. He goes, I'll sign you. Wow. That was it. Shook my hand, signed the contract, bada bing, bada boom.
So where did you record the album? How long did it take for it to come out? And then what became complicated during that time based on what was going on in the world?
Well, I had to wait about 6 months to get the spot on the roll to go in the studio. So I did that.
You remember where you recorded though? Where?
Butler Studios in Westwood.
Okay.
Off of Santa Monica and Butler.
Okay.
Did the recording, started playing, doing my thing. Everything was cool. And I went and did some promotional stuff in Boston and San Francisco. My album was out. Everything was doing great. I did a performance. I got a phone call from this gentleman from ABC TV. And he said, we're trying to get a hold of some local bands to come and perform at Cal State Los Angeles, because we got Jose Feliciano and Vicky Carr. They were the headliners at that time. Are you interested? I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I got my guys, I called them up. They were all local, you know, South Central, wherever they came. We all met at Cal State LA, went out there, and we're waiting. And guys like Malo, Tierra, El Chicano, all the local Chicano bands were there. I mean, everyone was there. So the stage manager comes out and he goes, all right, I need a band right now. Who's here that's got their instruments? And they all looked at each other because all their roadies had their instruments, but I came prepared.
Yeah.
That's when we went in and we did the performance. Came off the stage like 20, 30 minutes later, I was all sweaty and just, you know, I was just burned out. I'm sitting there in my van just changing my t-shirt, and here comes my cousin with this big white cat, about 6'4". And he comes up and he goes, man, you guys belong in Berlin, man. You guys belong in Portugal. You guys belong in Paris, man. He turned me on to George Wein, who's God when it comes to jazz. Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Count Basie. I mean, the big time. I spoke with George. He was really nice to me. He says, you're really highly came recommended to me. I would like to see you play some of our festivals. Berlin, he mentioned Stuttgart and the Berlin Festival, Oktoberfest, just a bunch of European places. I want to talk to your record company and see what's going on. Well, when he talked to my record company, for whatever reason, and this is where it gets a little crazy, they said they didn't want to promote my album or buy the radio time because of the oil embargo, which was going on at that time, right smack dab in the middle of that stuff.
Because you need that to make the final.
Right. And if you're going to promote the guy's albums, you can't make it.
Right.
If they would have been CDs, I would have been home free.
Right.
But it wasn't meant to be. I had people like Carlos Santana, Larry Coryell. I had Alphonse Mouzon. I had some heavyweights that were going to do the album tour with me.
Oh, wow.
And that was it. I left music for 12 years. And I went, got my degree, went to Universal Studios and worked in post-production, editorial.
You know, when I think about that seminal album that was released in '73, it's almost 50 years later, and we're here in the Linear Lab studio. And, you know, when we heard you were still around, still capable and everything, it was a delight for us, especially after listening to that album and wondering why everybody doesn't know about this album, you know? So when you came over here to meet us for the first time, you know, I just fell in love with you just because of who you are and your stories and just everything. You always, as soon as you look at somebody, you could just feel the energy, and the energy was just there already. But then when you came into the studio with Ali and I and Mickey and Nick, it was, you know, it was a very magical experience for us. The amount I learned from just watching you, you have no idea how much I learned from you, just watching you playing and listening to you, and seeing what we created. How was this experience for you?
Well, first of all, it was really surprising to me, because I'm at the age right now where a lot of people that I grew up with are no longer around.
Wow.
And I told somebody the other day, I said, you know what it feels like? And they said, what does it feel like? I said, it feels like that game we used to play when we were kids, musical chairs.
Wow.
And we're all kind of walking around the chairs, and each time you walk around, there's one less chair. It's that feeling where you're going to be left out sooner or later. You'll be gone. Actually, when I met my manager, he had called me out of the clear blue sky, and he was playing my album. He was working at UC Riverside, and he was telling me how much he really liked the music, and he wanted to meet me and do an interview with me. I was like, why? I mean, that's years ago. And then somebody wrote a book, The Dark Tree, that came out, and they mentioned me with all my black associates in South Central, and a few scattered, you know, Latinos, whites, you know. But I kept wondering, you know, why would they remember me, man? And then the thing came up, Garrett, you got a chance to meet these people and do some recording with them. And I looked at Wolf and I said, wow, it's like, like something out of the blue. That's the last thing I would expect. And thank goodness I've been involved in the film industry and acting, because they have this thing called the actor prepares. No matter what situation is, whatever you're in, you prepare yourself. So when it came up for me to come to the studio here and perform, I thought, well, let's meet up and let's see what goes on. And when I met Drew, we hit it off right away. I think we had a three-way conversation, and it was a conversation that should have lasted about 15 minutes. It lasted like 2.5 hours. I met you. Yeah. I met Ali. I met Nick. I met Michaela. I met the great film crew. It was like good home week. It felt so comfortable. I was telling people before I came, I was kind of anxious the night before. Yeah. And I felt like I was in the second grade. I just changed schools. And I had my little lunchbox and my uniform and then my books, and I was waiting for the school bus to pick me up. And was the teacher going to be okay? Was I going to be all right? Was it going to be, when you're a kid, you kind of go through that. As far as the jazz, I always felt comfortable with jazz.
Yeah.
It was never left, though I played music in the rock business for almost 25 years in my family.
Right.
And they kind of shunned at the idea of jazz. So I got here and it was a revelation, and it felt good, like somebody actually remembered me.
Wow.
The music.
Well, I mean, you made something that is timeless in '73, that's classic, that still resonates. An album that goes for hundreds of dollars, that's going to be going for thousands of dollars because it's hard to find. You coming in here, and I'm closing my eyes and I'm listening to you play, I'm like, this guy hasn't missed a step at all. It's literally like time stopped and we're all here together playing. And what's special to me about Jazz is Dead is that when it comes to artists like yourself, you say, why are you here, right? But it's because you have a lot more music to share with the people. You have a lot more art to share with the people. And we're just happy that we can be a vessel to help you do that, So, I mean, just thank you for being vulnerable enough to even be in the studio with us to make something new.